Hello fellow painters, today we are diving into the world of painting a crow. Inspired by the announcement of a new crow movie, I embarked on a quest to capture the essence of these iconic birds. But painting black is never just black, it's a symphony of hues found in nature. Armed with the incredible Army Painter air colors, we will explore the art of capturing these subtle variations. So grab your paints, brushes, and let's start. Using an airbrush, I sprayed Army Painter Tyrian Navy over the black primer to shift the monotony of black to a different hue, as black just doesn't cut it for me. You see, we don't want our friend here to be just plain black because, well, let's face it, nothing's just one color, right? Now, for our next trick, we are going to add some highlights to really make our little friend pop. I've got here some Vallejo white ink, perfect for creating those bright accents. We are going to use our airbrush again for this step. Think of it like how the sun hits things from above, casting those lovely shadows. This technique adds depth and realism to our little body, giving it that extra touch of life. Alright, now we are going to give our little body here a bit of a cool bluish tint. I've got some Army Painter Twilight Sky loaded up into the airbrush for this step. What we are aiming for is to create a subtle bluish hue on the body and wings, especially focusing on where the light would naturally hit. In this case, we are imagining it's hitting from a certain angle, so we will focus our blue tones accordingly. Now, for the next step, we are going to add some depth and richness to our miniature. I've got here some Army Painter Murder Scene paint, which I have diluted slightly with a bit of medium. This gives me more control over the color and helps prevent any clumping. It's all about layering and building up those shadows and highlights to create a more dynamic look. Alright, time to add a bit of flair to our miniature. I've got here some Citadel Gorgranta fur paint, and with my trusty brush, we are going to create some leather accent on certain parts of the armor. We are aiming for a brownish red tone to mimic leather, giving our miniature that extra touch of realism. Now let's add a bit more diversity to our miniature by incorporating different leather colors. I've got here some Citadel snakebite leather paint, and with my trusty brush we will paint some secondary leather areas like belts. By varying the colors of the leather, we create a more realistic and visually appealing appearance. Applying Army Painter Palette Bone as the primary color for all skull and bone elements, I ensured a consistent and coherent look across the miniature. These bone details will really stand out against the other colors, adding another layer of realism and interest to our miniature. Now let's give our miniature some metallic shine. I've got here some Citadel Iron Hand steel paint, and with my regular brush we will paint all the steel areas. We are not going for non-metallic metal here because we have something special planned. Instead, we are laying down this base color for the steel parts, knowing that we will enhance them later on with oil washes and some additional effects, like OSL. I used Army Painter Gravelord Grey to paint the legs and pig, adding subtle tonal variation to enhance the realism of these features. The Gravelord Grey adds a subtle contrast while maintaining a cohesive color scheme. Alright, let's give those skulls and bones the final touch before we move on to the next stage. I've got here some Vallejo bone white paint, and we are going to use it to highlight these areas. Using the airbrush for this step allows for a smooth and controlled application, ensuring our highlights are applied evenly and realistically. These highlights will really make those skulls and bones stand out once we apply the oil wash. Now let's add some final highlights to our miniature skirt and armor areas. I've got here some Army Painter Warlock Purple, and we will be using my airbrush for this step. Adding these highlights now is crucial because the oil wash we will apply next will blend them, creating a smooth transition and enhancing the overall look. These highlights will add depth and dimension to our miniature, making those areas really pop. I sprayed Vallejo light brown in the middle of the leather elements to create realistic light reflections, enhancing the texture and depth of these surfaces. This technique helps to enhance the texture and detail of the leather, making it look more lifelike. Now let's add some color to the wraps on our miniature spear. I've got here some Army Painter Forest Sprite, and we will use the regular brush for this step. These wraps are small detail, but adding a splash of color will make the spear stand out even more. Alright folks, now it's time to really bring out the details and add some depth to our miniature. Got here some modular deep black paint diluted with a bit of mineral spirit to create an oil wash. This oil wash is going to flow into the recesses and crevices, adding shadows and definition to our miniature. The oil wash will blend our highlights and shadows together, creating a more realistic and cohesive look. Now, after letting our oil wash settle for about 30 minutes, it's time to clean up any excess and refine the look of our miniature. For this, I'm using cosmetic pads. These pads are perfect for gently removing any excess oil wash without damaging the underlying layers of paint. Now let's add some extra depth to the shadows on our miniature steel areas. I've got here some army painter grim black paint, and we will be using both a brush and the airbrush for this step. By deepening these shadows, we create a more dynamic contrast and enhance the overall appearance of the steel. Let's add a final touch of brilliance to our miniature's armor and skirt highlights. I've got here some army painter warlock purple, and we will be using the airbrush for this step. By brightening these highlights, we add a dynamic contrast and bring out the intricate details of the armor and skirt. With the airbrush, I applied Vallejo Squid Pink to create light reflection on the armor and skirt, adding depth and dimension to these areas. These light reflections will give our miniature a dynamic and eye-catching appearance, enhancing the overall realism. Alright, let's add some dazzling gems to our miniature's armor and lay the groundwork for our planned OSL effect. I've got here some Vallejo orange fire, and we will be using the regular brush for this step. These gems will add a touch of sparkle to our miniature, while also serving as the shadows for our OSL effect. Now let's give our miniature's feathered areas a vibrant highlight before we move on to the pre-highlighting OSL stage. I've got here some army painter Hydra turquoise paint, and we will be using it to add some pops of color to the wings and body. These highlights will bring out the texture and detail of the feathers, adding depth and vibrancy to our miniature. Let's lay down the groundwork for our OSL effect around the gems on the armor and their surroundings. For this step, I'm using Vallejo white ink with the airbrush. By pre-highlighting these areas with a bright white color, we create a base for the glowing effect we will achieve later. Employing Liquitex yellow medium sprayed with the airbrush, I applied the main OSL color, infusing the surrounding areas with a warm, luminous glow. By using this yellow as our main OSL color, we create a striking contrast and make the gems appear as though they emitting light. I used Army Painter Cosmic Dust sprayed with the airbrush at the center of the gems to accentuate the light source of the OSL effect, adding a focal point of brightness and intensity. By adding this final touch, we create a sense of intensity and depth to our OSL effect, making it appear as though the gems are truly radiating light. For the final step in our OSL effect, let's add a subtle touch to simulate the faded light around the gems. I'm using Vallejo orange sprayed with the airbrush for this step. By adding this faded light effect, we create depth and atmosphere, making the OSL effect appear more natural and immersive. Using citadel karak stone and a brush, I painted highlights on the leather elements of the armor, adding texture and depth to these areas. These highlights will accentuate the texture and depth of the leather, adding realism and visual interest to our miniature. Vallejo Ice Yellow was used to paint edge highlights on the gems and their surroundings, adding a final touch of brightness and definition to these focal points. By highlighting these edges, we enhance the illusion of light reflecting of the gems, adding depth and dimension. I continue enhancing the details of our miniature by adding some highlights to the spear wraps. For this step, I'm using Vallejo Golden Olive with a fine-tipped brush. By adding these highlights, we create depth and definition, making the wraps stand out. Utilizing Citadel Fulgrim Pink and a brush, I have added some final touches to our armor elements to give them a weathered and worn appearance. Vallejo Warlord Purple was applied with a brush to edges and weathering details on darker areas of the armor. By adding these highlights and weathering effects to darker areas, we create contrast and visual interest, enhancing the overall look of the armor. Let's add some final highlights to the beak and legs of our miniature to really make them stand out. For this step, I'm using Vallejo Light Grey with both brush and an airbrush. These highlights will bring out the texture and detail of the beak and legs, adding depth and realism to our miniature. Utilizing Vallejo White ink, I began painting the spear blade to assemble a burning green flame by pre-highlighting it. This pre-highlighting will serve as the foundation for our fiery effect, ensuring that the colors we add later will pop and blend seamlessly. Liquitex Vivid Lime Green was sprayed onto the spear blade as the main flame color, infusing it with a vibrant and luminous green hue. This step brings the fiery effect to life, adding dynamism and excitement to the miniature's composition. I applied Army Painter Caribbean Ocean with the airbrush to create a faded flame color, adding depth and complexity to the green flame, while introducing an interesting blue tone. Finally, in the center of the flame, I sprayed Army Painter Canopy Green with the airbrush to serve as the light source, completing the OSL effect. This step adds a captivating focal point and brings the miniature to life with a sense of illumination and energy.
I hope you have enjoyed this one. If yes,
As always, do not forget to like the recording, subscribe to the channel, comment down below, and I will see you the next time. Bye bye!